why don't Gen Z have these human skills? COVID plays a role in that. Those human skills that are a natural byproduct of attending school and of having robust discussion in a classroom, negotiating social dynamics at recess or lunchtime.
I'm not being supportive of that student, nor am I acknowledging the experiences that they have missed out on where those skills would have been built. Instead, we need to address those learning gaps and actually focus on providing opportunities to learn those specific skills.
Sometimes it'll be easier to just do it ourselves rather than to explain it, but that's not a long-term solution. Once you build that relationship with a parent or whoever, a guardian, whatever it may be, and they can actually do it, it's like, yes, that small amount of extra effort leads to less time later on.
Podclass acknowledges the traditional and true custodians of the land we meet on here today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We're grateful to be here.
So no one told you teaching was gonna be this way. Your lesson plans are jokes, your patience broke, you're feeling in disarray. It's like you're always stuck in report writing, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your school year. But I'll be here for you.
When the students start to riot,
I'll be here for you.
even if your coffee's gone cold,
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Hello and welcome back to Podclass. You are joined, as always, by your host, Sky. That is me.
Amanda.
that is you, and Will is me. I'm Billy Wilson. We are so excited to be back for another week with you.
We are absolutely pumped to be here, and we are going to be diving into a bit of a juicy topic today. It's had quite a lot of media coverage. We probably all have an opinion about it, whether or not you're an educator or whether or not you're just someone who has been alive for the last few years. But this one is all about the impact of COVID on students.
And I think
The after effects.
Yeah, and I think we've had a lot of requests lately to unpack this topic, and I think it's become a lot clearer. Interestingly, it's been a few years since COVID, but it's becoming clear now what those impacts are, and we're seeing it in our classrooms, we're seeing it in our homes, we're seeing it in the social implications for our teenagers and for our young people. And so I feel like it's amazing because it's a topic from a while ago, but we're seeing the impact now. And so what we're going to be unpacking is, I guess, how that impact was created, which for some might be really obvious, but we'll step into that. And then we'll also talk about, from those implications, what can we do to be supporting young people?
And before we go any further into that, I just really want to acknowledge Podclass for being a podcast that didn't start in COVID. And I'm just really proud. I just really wanted to make that note.
We are a post-COVID podcast.
Yeah, we are a post-COVID podcast.
Yeah.
But we don't need to go into like the detail of what COVID was. We all know what that experience was. Everyone had, it was very universalized around the world. We all had an experience of it. And whether that was sourdough or puzzles or just being at home and watching,
My experience was so unique. During COVID, I was living in a remote Indigenous community. And so
just remove my last comment about universalized experiences.
It was challenging because I was having I'm from Melbourne, but I was in the Northern Territory, and I was having a very different experience where we weren't necessarily in our homes, but within the community. The roads were blockaded. There were police based at the airstrip, so flights couldn't come in or out. So it was very much like its own bubble for months and months and months and months. Very different, but very interesting.
Also during COVID is when Amanda and I really bonded for the first time.
Yes,
That's
so
right.
true.
So
Over burritos.
I was stuck in Darwin for 3 days.
That was in 2021.
2021, I rang up Amanda. We didn't really know each other too
Not that well. I mean, I'd known you since you were like 17, but it was a bit random getting a call being like, hi, I'm in Darwin. Can I come to your house for the snap 72-hour lockdown?
And we had burritos, breakfast, lunch and dinner.
Yeah, lots of fun.
That's the best.
I remember we were delivering Wyler events in between lockdowns and in between border closures. And one of the most interesting things that we probably experienced was, I think it was 2022.
Yeah.
And we obeyed every restriction there was, would have multiple events instead of large events. And we speak quite often about sticky notes and how we're all big advocates for post-it notes. We are asking yet again for sponsorships. And we had this activity where they were putting post-it notes on the wall, and we had done it in all five cities before.
And also it's something you do every year. It's a very open-ended task, and whether there's 100 people in the room or 2,000 people in the room, and obviously there wasn't as many in COVID times, but it's just like, place your sticky note on the wall.
In Adelaide, probably 100-metre wall, there are sticky notes from left to right of that wall, up and down.
Wild.
You have students just jumping and like slapping as hard as they can. And then we get to Melbourne, it was delayed, so it was a little bit later in term 2. Day 1, we have 400 sticky notes just in straight lines and straight rows.
Yeah.
No instruction, no different instruction to any other city. And we're like, that's a little bit odd. And then we come back the second day, completely new group of students, completely different schools.
Secondary students.
And the same thing happens. Straight rows,
fascinating.
Straight lines, and nowhere else have we ever seen it like that before. And they had just come out of probably 3 months earlier, another lockdown, right?
Yeah, well, basically off the back of some 18 months of on and off lockdowns and being quite, I guess, quite strict around what we're doing and where we're going and who we're standing near and all of that. We all know.
And a lot of those restrictions incredibly enforced.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of rules and a lot of regulations that had to be followed. These were the rules and this is what you have to do.
And what you see in the, from a glance of it is there are straight rules, there are straight lines, and that results in our sticky notes and our creative thinking almost being altered, or for a young person, possibly we can read it as their willingness to go outside of the lines or do something different is reduced, right?
I think there was a huge amount of fear, particularly for people who are maybe living in Victoria and living in New South Wales at the time. And they were really scared to break the rules and to get in trouble or to risk someone else's health around you in your community. Mm-hmm. And that was totally reflected in that example. It's just so crazy.
It's really fascinating. And I think it's, off the back of that, that's immediately following those times, what you saw, and that's anecdotal data, but it's, you've never seen it since, and you've never seen it in any other city. And so it is quite strong, very interesting data. And off the back of that, for our young people, what we're now seeing a number of years later, and teachers and facilitators and parents bring it up with us all the time, is we're seeing some implications from that time around, I guess, some social implications for our young people and for young people that were really restricted and at home for a long period at a really crucial socially developmental period. Yeah. And we're seeing that play out now. And anecdotally, that sounds like teachers coming to us and being like, well, why aren't they just taking initiative? Or why aren't they just asking questions? Or why aren't they just building relationships? It sounds like parents coming to us and being like, well, why aren't they just taking this risk? Or, and it's like, well, actually, we need to look a bit deeper and there's more at play here. And so it becomes, yes, young people can be guiding themselves in that, but how are we guiding them in it? And that's what we're going to talk about today.
And I think probably looking at the bigger picture, so zooming out, obviously great examples, but zooming out, if we reflect on that time, there was a lot of online learning. There was a lot of restriction in terms of their socialization outside of their family units. And that's if young people were lucky enough to have or be connected in family units in the homes that they were in. I was in a wellbeing support role at the time, and some of the students I was supporting might have been one of 6 or 8 children in a house, and I'm having, Google Meets with them from their laundry because that's the only spare room in their house that they've got to be able to take a private conversation with their wellbeing.
And we're not talking 1 week. We're talking months.
So we know that there was a lot of stuff going on in there. There was a lot of self-led learning as a result, a lot of screen time. And depending on the school that a student was enrolled in, it looked really different. Some schools had a bit more of a self-led model. Other teachers had their educators teaching every single class as per usual. And it just meant that there was this really crucial time, as you said, where they weren't having the experience that school is, which is so much more than just the maths, the science, the English, the learning part of it. And it really shows us the importance of those environments where young people are with each other. It's that connectedness, it's that belonging piece. And if we look at core psychological needs, we know that relatedness and having that connection with other people is one of the absolute essentials for their development.
And so there's a bit of irony in the fact that there's a lot of commentary at the moment around, why don't Gen Z have these human skills? And I think we could probably anecdotally say that COVID plays a role in that. Those human skills that are a natural byproduct of attending school and of having robust discussion in a classroom and of negotiating social dynamics, you know, at recess or lunchtime.
I remember in 2023 when we were delivering programs in schools in Victoria and New South Wales, it would be like, compared to what we were delivering pre-2020, it would be like we're bringing this down a few levels of what we were at. And that's not to say that it's just that they haven't experienced as much social interaction, right? And they don't know social cues as well as what they used to. And simultaneously at the same time, I also think young people grew up faster through the period of COVID, as well as not being able to experience what is expected.
Well, it was very serious, and that's, I think, why we've now had so many conversations. We get asked so much about bringing play and curiosity into learning, because it was a very serious, very scary time for young people. Yeah.
We also need to, I think, like moving forward, like this is all, like I think we can all agree, right, that there's been huge implications. We also know that we're not going to know the full extent of it still for some time to come. Like research is being conducted. We have data that supports, obviously, that there has been challenges in learning and social connectedness.
And mental health.
And mental health, of course. And I think it's really important for us as anyone who supports a young person, so whether you are a teacher, a parent, a guardian, a program facilitator, not having an expectation that young people know how to do something, particularly for this big cohort of young people that have spent so much time in that space of disconnectedness.
And we're seeing that even in just what schools are asking for. I mean, at Youth Engagement Project, for example, we are getting asked so much now about public speaking workshops for students. And what's public speaking at the end of the day? Sure, it's speaking in front of people, and there's a whole
communicate with the world.
Yes, there's a whole suite.
And
there's a whole suite of strategies, but at its core, it is communication and connection. And there's this huge uptick in demand for that, because these are some of the human skills that maybe haven't naturally developed in the last 5 years as they may have if the world would have looked different.
Accelerated learning environments like the workshops, right, that allow for that. You're not going to get years and years of content in, but you're going to get them learnings faster and harder. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it is like we go in and we facilitate these school workshops. We love doing it. We spend time, whether it's with small groups or whole year levels, and whether it's a half day or a full day workshop, and they get immersed in this human skills experience. And what it is it's helping to bridge those gaps that schools do not have the space for in their already A, overloaded curriculum, but B, we find, again, this is feedback we get from the teaching community, is that so much of the social emotional learning that takes place is really tokenistic, or it's pitched too low, or it's not actually reaching or meeting students where they're at, or really giving them a new skill or something that they can actually put into practice. And that's a real issue, because our SEL lessons then, if they become tokenistic and they become something that students are like, oh, this again, oh, we're talking about resilience, oh, we're talking about this. Exactly right. That engagement goes out the window, and our young people aren't getting the skills that they then need to be prepared.
Yeah. So I think to summarize the impact, what we're seeing that we need to put more intentional effort into developing those human skills with this cohort. We actually have seen overall across the country a decline in school attendance post-COVID, and also an uptick in homeschooling, which is really interesting across the country. And that as educators and anyone who works with young people, we can't just have an expectation of those skill sets. So then the question becomes, well, what can we do? And how can we help them and support them in that? Because it's not wrong. Making it wrong, judging it, making it bad doesn't help our young people move through it, doesn't help them increase their skill set, and doesn't encourage them to come to us next time again when we need help or when we're not sure what to do.
And I think a big part of that is not judging our students when they are coming to us for support. And because I think it's really easy for us to flip into that thing, like they should know how to do this. Or, you know, you've got a year 9 student who's maybe having a friendship issue or a breakdown, and they've come and they have no idea how to solve that or navigate that conflict. And we're going, oh my God, I was in year 7 should be able to manage this. And if that's my inner dialogue and that's my judgmental thinking, I'm not being supportive of that student, nor am I acknowledging the experiences that they have missed out on where those skills would have been built. So instead, we need to address those learning gaps and actually focus on providing opportunities to learn those specific skills.
And so fostering that in our spaces can just look like, you know, maybe where young people might have self-led that connection or that engagement with each other previously, we might have a list of questions that are in our back pocket that if there's a spare 3 minutes, we can just throw a question to the class, turn to the person next to you and share with them. And it can be anything, right, to build connection. And it can start with something as simple as choose, would you rather have a pet dolphin or a pet dragon? Have that, do you know what I mean? Like it can be anything. It's like a spark of connection. But we need to lead this for now to help get those dials turning.
And I think that's so indicative in those classrooms you walk into and maybe the lesson hasn't begun yet and yet everyone's just sitting there like not talking, and you're like, it's okay to talk, or you can chat amongst yourselves. Like just giving them that permission of you can chat amongst yourselves sometimes isn't enough because they don't know how to chat amongst themselves without a screen in between them or without having a phone or something to support or a video to watch with their friend. We can give them those prompts and little activities to do, as simple as they might seem, just to help build that skill set and build their confidence in that connection piece.
And I think something else we can do is, as educators and facilitators, look after our own well-being as well, which puts us in a better position to read and respond with young people. If we are not recharged, if we don't have a full cup, I mean, we've said it before and we'll say it again, we can't pour from an empty cup, and we certainly can't read the room, and we certainly can't foster connection from an empty cup. And so it's not like it was an easy time for teachers either. So if you're listening to this episode and you're reflecting not only on young people, but on maybe, you know, changes in yourself or changes in your social dynamics. I know, Sky, you've even shared, you feel like post-COVID, you're actually much more of an introvert than what you were.
Oh, I reflect on it all the time. I feel like I would have been labelled as an extrovert 100% of the time pre-COVID.
You were socialising like 5 nights a week.
And that was normal for me. I would have literally
pre-COVID, that was Sky.
And it was just, that was just like...
It's a lot of pho.
But it was just so normal.
It was lots and lots of fur.
Like pho with a girlfriend one night, going rock climbing with friends the next night, like catching a film the next night. Like it was just
going to local trivia the next night.
And now I'm like, if I get to socialise, like this is my socialisation time right now. But if I do that, you know, even once a week, like that is a good week. And I prefer it. I've learned how to be by myself, and I guess I see that as a positive. But it also has meant that, like, if I think about that and I think about our young people, like if I'm like that as an adult and I have the capacity to reflect and I can still choose to be social and put myself out there if I want to be. But if I'm a young person and my norm is just being with myself and I haven't had that experience. Exactly. So we need to be encouraging that. And I also just want to touch on one more thing, which is talking to the fact that in order to best support our young people, we really need to be boosting the connection between home and school, particularly in this, like we are on the same team. And I think it's really important for our young people to understand that, but also for parents and guardians, because as teachers, it's so easy for us to feel like all of the responsibility for all of this staff just falls on our shoulders. It's like, well, we're no longer just the teacher. We're also the wellbeing person, and we're also the counsellor, and we're also, you know, we can play all these different roles, and we don't have to take that all on ourselves. We can work with our parents, with our guardians, with our broader school community. So it's a wraparound support for students, and it doesn't entirely fall in our laps.
And I think that's probably one of them things of like, yes, sometimes it would be easier to just do it ourselves rather than to have to explain it, but that's not a long-term solution.
Yes.
And once you build that relationship with a parent or whoever, a guardian, whatever it may be, and they can actually do it, it's like, yes, that small amount of extra effort leads to less time later on.
Yeah. And so we acknowledge there are these changes, and in noticing them in young people, or in, you know, maybe making assumptions, or notice those judgments of why don't they know how to do this, or why don't they know how to make that phone call, or why don't they know how to book this appointment in my day, like it's different. So let's scrap the judgment and let's go to curiosity, and let's go, well, how can we support them in building this skill set? Is it taking 5 minutes and prioritizing connection every time I have this class? Is it getting an external provider to come in and deliver a skill set? Like, what is it, and how can we meet those gaps? Because we really need to, because the gaps are going to stick around unless we meet them. So I think there's
And our young people deserve it.
They do.
really
They
deserve
do.
to have those gaps met and those gaps closed.
And we really believe, all three of us really believe, not in gatekeeping in this space, but in collaboration and in sharing knowledge and in opening to support meeting those gaps, because they're going to stay if we don't fill them. So we believe we have a responsibility to work together to do that.
We're all in this
Together once you...
Will's like, doesn't know what that is.
I just watched Friends the other night and started singing our song, but that was my.
That was definitely not Friends, but I really appreciate your
was like,
effort. Simon.
So you not know that song that we just sung?
It's Grease Lightning.
Oh my gosh.
Troy Bolton superfan over here, clearly.
Got the Gen Z in the room. Okay, on that note...
We clearly have a knowledge gap, so we're going to go off air and talk to Wilson about that.
All right.
See you next week.
Bye.
See you then. Bye.
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Thanks so much for tuning into Podclass. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would adore it if you could go on to Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. 5 stars would be lovely. We would love to get this podcast into as many ears as possible so we can help and support as many people as possible who help young people. And if you're not already doing so, please go along to Instagram and follow us at podclass.aus.